In today's video, we're going to take a look at dividing decimal numbers. So what we're going to start with is just dividing a decimal number by a whole number. So the example we have here is 7.824 divided by 4. Now I just want to take a moment to think about what division actually means. And if you take a look at the diagram here, the purple rectangle represents an amount of 7.824, and when we say divided by 4, what we're saying is how many times can we fit 4 into 7.824. And if you look at the diagram, 4 fits in not quite twice, so it goes in 1 and something times. So what we can do is this. First of all, to see if we've got the right answer, we should round and give an estimate for this calculation. So 7.824 we can round to 8 divided by 4, and we can say, okay, it's going to go in about 2 times. And really easily you can just divide a whole number by a decimal number by setting it up the way you would do short division, and just keep the decimal point in the same place and divide as you normally would. So 4 goes into 7 once with a remainder of 3, so I'll put my remainder of 3 there. 4 goes into 38 9 times with a remainder of 2. 4 goes into 22 5 times with a remainder 2, and 4 goes into 24 6 times. So what I've got here is that my calculation, 7.824 divided by 4, is 1.956. And that's pretty close to our estimation. We estimated that it went in about 2 times. And you can see here that from the diagram, that would make sense. It goes in just under 2 times, 1.956. Okay, so we're not going to want to draw a diagram every time, but what we would do is just set up like long division and keep the decimal points lined up. Okay, so the decimals here and here. Okay, in the next couple examples, we're going to look at dividing a decimal number by a power of 10. So what I mean by a power of 10 is anything that is a multiple of 10 or 100 or 1,000, so on. So in this case here, we've got 4.8 divided by 40. And the same way as when we multiplied by multiples of 10, we're going to split the 40 up into 4 and 10, okay, 2 factors of 40. So we're going to make this 4.8 divided by 4 and then divided by 10. Okay, so 4.8 divided by 4, I'll just do on the side here. You might know it already, but 4.8 divided by 4, we'll just set it up. Keep my decimal places lined up. 4 goes into 4 once, and 4 goes into 8 twice, no remainder. So I get here that 4.8 divided by 4 is 1.2. And then I'm going to divide that by 10. And when I divide by 10, I get a number that's 10 times smaller. So the decimal place moves once to the left. So I get an answer of 0.12. Okay, so 4.8 divided by 40 is 0.12. Now let's try this similarly with the next one. So I've got 19.2 divided by 600. I'm going to split that up into 19.2 divided by 6 and then divide by 100. So there's my 600 there. Divide by 6, then divide by 100. Okay, so 19.2 divided by 6. 6 goes into 19 3 times with a remainder of 1. 6 goes into 12 twice. And if I just line up my decimal, I get that 16 goes into 19.2, 3.2 times. And then I need to divide that answer by 100. So my decimal place moves twice to the left, so I get 0.032 as an answer. Okay, last bit is just looking at dividing a decimal number by another decimal number. So the example we've got here is 2.8 divided by 0.4. And again, just looking at it with a picture, what we mean how many 0.4s can we fit into 2.8? So you can see here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 0.4s, and that divides in exactly, because if you do sort of 0.4 plus 0.4 gives me 0.8, add another 0.4, I'm at 1.2, add another 1.6, 2.0, 2.4, and then 2.8. So that goes in exactly 7 times. But we're not going to want to have to draw a picture every single time, so we need a bit of a strategy to be able to work this out. And as we know, division and fractions are equivalent. So 2.8 divided by 0.4 is the same thing as saying 2.8 over 0.4. That's how many times does 0.4 go into 2.8. And what we want is, we want an equivalent fraction, but we want the denominator to be a without a decimal. So we want the denominator to be a whole number. So because I've got one decimal place here, if I multiply that denominator by 10, and of course whatever I do to the denominator I must do to the numerator, so if I multiply them both by 10, I get the equivalent fraction of 28 over 4. Okay, now 28 over 4, I can think how many times does 4 go into 28, and I know that goes in 7 times. So those are all equal to each other. Okay, so your strategy is to write your division as a fraction, okay, multiply by 10 or 100 or 1,000 to get a whole number on the bottom as your denominator, and then do your division. We'll try a few more examples together. Okay, so I've got 3 practice questions here, and if you're feeling really confident, you can go ahead and try these on your own. Otherwise, you can do them along with me. So if you want to try them on your own, just pause the video now. Okay, 4.8 divided by 8. That's just dividing by a whole number, so I can just set up the division the way I'm used to. 8 goes into 4.8. How many times? Line up my decimal. 8 goes into 4 0 times, so I think about it as 8 goes into 48, and that goes in 6 times with no remainder. So that just gives me 0.6. And you can obviously check also by going backwards, by doing your multiplication. So we can check by saying, what is 0.6 times 8? And we know from doing multiplication with decimals that I would just think of that as 6 times 8, which is 48. And I need 1 decimal place in my answer. So that looks like I've done the right thing there. Okay, second one there, 924.8 divided by 200. What I'm going to do is I'm going to think about that 200 as 2 and 100. So I'm going to rewrite this division as 924.8 divided by 2 and then divide by 100. So 924.8 divided by 2. I'll just do a bit of working out up here. Okay, line up my decimal. 2 goes into 9 twice with a remainder of 1. 2 goes into 12 6 times. 2 goes into 4 twice. And 2 goes into 8 4 times. So 924.8 divided by 2 is, oops, sorry, you probably noticed I made a little mistake there. I should have had a 4 up there. Sorry about that. So 2 went into 9 4 times, not twice. So 924.8 divided by 2 is 462.4. And then I need to divide my answer by 100. So I need to move the decimal place twice to the left. So I get 4.624 as my final answer. Okay, last one here. I've got a decimal divided by a decimal. So hopefully you've remembered that I'm going to rewrite that as a fraction, 22.5 divided by 0.3. And I'm going to make that an equivalent fraction with a whole number on the bottom. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 10. So I'm going to get 225 divided by 3. So now I need to work that out. What is 225 divided by 3? I'll just work that over here. 3 goes into 2 0 times, so 3 goes into 22 7 times with a remainder of 1. 3 goes into 15 5 times with no remainder. So that means my final answer then is 75. So 22.5 divided by 0.3 is 75. And you can check all of these with multiplication or by estimating the final answer.